I would like to call this meeting, City Planning Commission, to order. If all of you would please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Sue, can you have a roll call for me?
Commissioner Cadwalder.
Here.
Commissioner Holst.
Here.
Commissioner Padula.
Here.
Commissioner Plank.
Here.
Commissioner Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Chambers is absent, and Chair Ellis.
Here. Do I have a motion to excuse Marty Chambers?
I'll make a motion.
I can second.
Okay. Excused then. Oh, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed the same. He is excused. Thank you, Andy. Do I have a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there support?
I can support.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. And it is approved. Okay. Next, I would entertain a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
And is there a second?
I'll support.
Any discussion? Thank you for Mike for covering for me last month.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
So good.
Ouch. Okay, all in favor to support this, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. And it carries. Good. At this time, I would like to open it for public comment on anything not on the agenda. If anybody has anything to ask us or talk about that's not on the agenda, we will all entertain you. Nothing? Okay, I close that. Old business then. The master plan implementation. Andy, could you review this?
Yes.
I read it, it looks
Sure.
good.
So this is what will likely be the final chapter of the master plan. So as you know, we've been working on this for the better part of the year and a half now. So the final step in drafting a master plan is coming up with basically a to-do list for the city. And some of it's planning commission items, some of it's driven by city council, some of it's driven by staff. But the idea is to take all of the information and all of the recommendations from the goals and objectives that we talked about a few months ago, and the future land use recommendations and all the information that we heard from the public over the last year and a half, and basically sort of distill that down into figuring out how we actually make those things happen, right? So we've talked a lot about housing or the river or various other topics, and so the question for the planning commission is, how do we actually do that? What do we have to do to implement the plan to, turn it into actionable steps and not just words on paper that we're just going to leave it there and not do anything? So this chapter is, summarizes where we've been and what we've heard and kind of how we get there. So I'll just walk briefly through each of these items. There's 6 of them, I think. This is certainly not set in stone by any stretch of the imagination. So if you have comments, edits, if you want to add something, reword something, whatever you feel like, it is absolutely appropriate for the planning commission to spend some time at this meeting talking about them and making any changes that you feel necessary. But the first one that we heard most frequently from this group and from others is activation on the Lowell River. So we know that there is some frontage right across the street here by the showboat where there is, the city has done a nice job of providing some access to the flat river. We've heard over and over and over again, whether it's dredging, whether it's providing additional access on the opposite side of the river to really capitalize on the Flat River as the asset that it is to the city. And to a, lesser extent, but also even, the Grand River as well, right? I mean, you're very unique in the fact that you have two really important rivers flowing right through your community or right adjacent to your community. So this first item sort of recognizes that and is a suggestion that the city, work to find ways to activate that, recognizing that it's not something that you can probably do on your own. There are other levels of government and there are other regulators involved and other bodies and entities that are going to need to be involved in such an effort. But that's something that needs to happen for a lot of the plans, policies, and recommendations to come forward. Number 2 is zoning ordinance revisions. So a lot of what we talk about in the master plan in terms of land use are going to be things that we need to change in zoning to make them happen. So if we're talking about different housing types, different housing sizes, attainability, attached, detached, all these kinds of things. Many of the changes to the future land use map that we've looked at between the old and the new are going to have to happen through some kind of change to the zoning ordinance. Some of them could be as simple as just looking to rezone certain properties from one zoning district to another. Others might be more involved than that. So some examples that we have listed in here would be you could consider adding some additional design standards to your downtown district. You could add additional land uses that are not presently listed in the zoning ordinance as either permitted or special uses. You could look to make procedural changes to facilitate desirable forms of development. So if there's something that you really want to see in the city, a type of development form, we could look for ways to simplify the approval process to get things approved faster. Maybe take something that was a special use and you make it a permitted use, where we take permitted uses and you make them staff review instead of planning commission review, things like that. We could also look at the addition of various housing types to ensure that are significant options available for all residents. So a lot of people sort of commented that there is mostly single family homes. There aren't a lot of other housing types available in the city. There are some multifamily, there are some manufactured homes. When we look at some of the other forms, accessory dwelling units, attached or townhomes or row houses and stuff like that, there really aren't many options in the city, if any. And so looking for ways to either allow for existing developments to increase themselves in density by some small amount, or some other way to get additional housing units in the city. That is something that could also be done through zoning. We've had some conversations with applicants and property owners over the years that maybe want to add 1 or 2 units to their property. And based on some regulation in zoning, the answer is no, sorry, you can't do it because this district or this type of development, tops out at a certain number of units per acre, or the setback is this, or the height limitation is that. And so that can limit certain property owners from being able to add to their property and add additional housing units to the city. And when you sort of add all that together in aggregate is how you end up with supply problems like what we're seeing, not just in Lowell, but all over the place in the state of Michigan. So those are just some suggestions. There are probably some other things that can be done. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list, rather just to show you some examples of things that we can do in zoning to help implement the plan. Item 3 is implementation of the place plan. So if you're not familiar with the place plan, it is online, I believe. In 2018, this is a document that was drafted probably in 2014, I want to say. It was formally adopted by the city in 2018. It's a really cool document that focuses largely on the downtown. The idea of the place plan is to create public spaces that promote people's health, happiness, and well-being. And so a lot of it has to do with how we're designing the public realm in terms of building facades, sidewalks, wayfinding, walkability, things like that. It focuses on a few different sections of what I would call the downtown. So there's the downtown core. There's a little section that focuses on Monroe Street, which is right outside the building here. River South, which is south of Main Street, downtown east and downtown west. There's also elements in there that talk about street design, wayfinding signage, public art, and things like that. So again, it's really looking to cultivate a sense of place within downtown Lowell and make it, to further sort of complement the existing kind of unique character of the city. We think that's something that should be followed through with and implemented. Number 4 is the housing strategy. So here we write that while the city currently contains a mix of older and newer housing in both traditional and suburban patterns, there are opportunities in many neighborhoods to maintain and improve the condition of properties throughout the city. This would involve attention to public spaces such as streets and sidewalks. And it also explores ways that the cities can enable the development of additional attainable housing options. So again, looking at from a sort of strategic planning standpoint, adding duplexes and seeing how that's viable, looking at multifamily, seeing how that's viable. In addition to that, making sure that all of these types of developments are well connected to adjacent neighborhoods, to shopping services, things that people need through ways other than just driving a car, right? So making sure that our sidewalks are well built out, that our sidewalk network is complete, and we continue to add to the non-motorized trail network in the city, things of that nature. Number 5, partnerships with local government, schools, and community stakeholders. A lot of this work is ongoing, and I think the city and the school districts and the adjacent townships have historically done a really good job of sort of working cooperatively with one another. We've been involved in some of those efforts over the years, whether it's through trail planning, recreation planning, and things like that. So one of the things that we talked about in here is just continuing to do that, recognizing that Lowell is not just the city and everything stops at Alden Nash and everything doesn't stop once you get to the Grand River and things like that. That you're, in addition to being your own city, your own governmental entity, also part of a larger region in this area of Kent County, and that what happens in Virginia's Township, what happens in Lowell Township, obviously is going to have an impact on the city as well. And so that it basically encourages the city to continue to foster those kinds of relationships, to move things forward. That could be planning related, it could be recreation related, it could be economic development efforts, working together to attract new businesses, new industry, things of that nature. We also contemplate some coordination of zoning and land use standards along Main Street. This I think would be most relevant on M21, kind of on the west side of the city, the east side of the township, where we have many people who don't know the city well. You might not know that your city limit starts at a specific location. And so from an access management standpoint, from a land use perspective, it might be worth having some more coordinated efforts along that corridor to make sure that traffic's moving safely. Again, there's room for people to walk, for people to bike, and things like that. And the last thing we have on the list here is continued non-motorized trail development. I think the city in the last 15 or 20 years has done a really incredible job of working really actively to build out a great non-motorized trail system. I think it's fitting that your headquarters for the North Country Trail, right across the street here. We have regional non-motorized connections through the Fred Meyer Flat River Valley Rail Trail, but you also have a great network of sidewalks. You have local trails that help people get around town, not only for recreational purposes, but in some cases I think for practical day-to-day purposes. So I think there's a lot of value that you can add to the city and really continuing to focus on that. The Planning Commission has I think done that, and the city has some ordinances in place that require sidewalks. The Planning Commission has typically focused on sidewalk connections when you're looking at new developments in the city, particularly along Main Street, but also in other places as well. So continuing to sort of build out that network and to focus those efforts as you have been is something that we'd also recommend moving forward. So that's the list. Again, this is not intended to be final, so if there are things you want to add or questions or comments, I'm happy to receive them. I guess from there, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you for any discussion or deliberations.
Okay.
We can talk about next steps after that.
Thoughts?
my first impression was that there's definitely like additional deliberation needed, particularly with respect to, the zoning ordinance revisions and the bullet list there. Like, I felt like when I read that, like, we could definitely use like a separate working group sort of session or something where we look at what the actual options are associated with these different bullets and where we go from there. I like all these like concepts, but I don't really know what it means in a concrete sense as to what we would do. But it looked like a great set of ideas, and I wouldn't want to just leave it on the page here. I would want to like pursue it to,
Definitely a lot of work
yeah.
that has to be done. This is like the introduction paragraph of what we're going to do. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah, so well, each of these items, so this is going to be, again, one chapter in the plan when we're done. So this is kind of telling you, once the plan is adopted, what should you be doing? And so one of the things that the planning commission could opt to focus on would be these zoning ordinance revisions. For whatever reason, you might choose to focus on all of them or two of them. There may be things that are not on this list that you want to do, and that's all fine. This isn't really meant to be an exhaustive list of everything that we can do. But that's one of the tasks, I think, that if we're going to accomplish a lot of the goals that the plan has talked about, that's something that I think is going to need to happen, right? So, we need to, I think, maintain some flexibility in how the plan is prepared, so it's not super prescriptive in terms of you have to do what's on the list and you can't do anything that's not on the list, and if it is on the list, then you have to do it, and if it's not on the list, then you can't. Like, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to give you an example of some things that, we've talked about, some things that in our experience helps to accomplish some of the goals we've talked about. But I don't want you to think of it as something where you have to think of everything right now. That's going to be a subsequent step, and you're right. We'll need a small committee. We'll need a working group of some sort with staff members, with maybe a city council member or two to kind of figure out how we want to make all of these things happen and what's going to be the best track to go. Absolutely. I think that'll be a later step down the line once the plan's done.
Yeah.
Well, and in prep for that, probably each of the planning commissioners, myself, I'm thinking personally of some of the education planning, like Michigan Planning Association sort of education and courses and things. We should probably really bone up on some of that going into this. I've always seen that as oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let's make that happen. But knowing now we're going into this, it's probably time to bump that right up to the top of the priority list.
Do you have any other discussion? What is the next step then, Andy?
Yep, so I think from here what we will do is, hopefully for the next meeting, we'll have a complete draft of the entire plan, cover to cover, that will come out for you to review. It'll be a lengthy document, so we don't need to go through it like paragraph by paragraph at the next meeting, but there's going to be a lot in there for you to read and review and digest. So we'll have that done out to you as soon as possible. It should be in advance of the September meeting. If you need to take a meeting to sort of go over it, ask questions, and think about it some more, that's absolutely fine. I'm not on a super tight time frame or anything. Eventually, you'll need to make a recommendation to City Council to distribute the draft. Then we have to wait for quite a long time for that waiting period to happen. So once City Council distributes the draft, that has to go to the neighboring townships, to the county, to the Regional Planning Commission, some other entities, and the statute requires that we wait like 9 weeks for that feedback period. So during that period, we can certainly look at it, think about it some more. I think we might have another open house on the draft plan scheduled for public consumption. I'll have to double check on that to make sure it's something that we're going to do. But eventually, once that 9-week period ends, the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing, and they will eventually recommend it to adoption, to the City Council for adoption. So there's a lot of steps left to go, and there's kind of a lot of waiting around. But this is really going to be, this will be pretty darn close to the final document that you'll get next month, subject to whatever changes you want to make.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to get the document, we're going to review it ourselves outside of this, bring our concerns to the council, discuss them, change them, or modify them.
Yep.
Not all in one night, correct?
Depends on how it goes, even probably not. If you have a ton of changes, then obviously it just depends on how long the meeting goes. So if we get through everything and we're done in a couple hours, that's fine. If you guys have a lot of stuff that you want to, revisit, go back to, then if it's multiple meetings, that's fine too.
Okay.
So, I mean, the goal is to take as long as we need to take to make sure that you're happy with it.
Okay.
And we'll get this a draft hopefully prior to the September
Yes.
meeting to review.
Yep, we're already working on the final document. We'll add this along with anything else that you want to add in there. We have your changes from the previous chapters with respect to goals and the future land use map and all that. So that'll be incorporated in there with all of the changes. We'll have a summary of all of the input we did. So there's going to be quite a bit of information in there that'll kind of summarize where the city is now, all of the feedback you heard from the public, and then kind of the last section is where do you want to go and how do you want to get there. And so there's going to be a lot to think about and digest as we move forward.
Would it be possible, Sue, when we have that draft copy, to get a digital and a hard copy of it?
Sure, yes.
I mean, I'm happy to come pick it up.
Okay.
Needed, but
Yep, I can let each of you know. I'll just send out an email stating that you want that copy, it's ready to be picked up.
thank you.
Any other questions?
I think this does a good job summarizing everything that we talked about. It's everything we've talked about since April.
Yeah. Okay, I look forward to seeing that. New business, King Milling. Do we have a representative to kind of give us a summary of what you're thinking? Come on up and state your name and talk to us a little bit.
My name is Matt Cole. I'm with Rosina and Associates. We're the engineers for King Milling, and Regan's here if you have any operational questions. What they're looking to do here has two primary benefits. They want to expand their current pit so it'll reach over to a second rail spur, and then they want to enclose that all in a canopy. So that way the employees, are out of the inclement weather, and you don't introduce as much moisture to the grain. And then that's one of the benefits. And then the other is by getting to that expanded pit with the second line, it should require crossing Hudson only half as much as right now. Right now they go in and then they got to come back out. This way they'd be able to go in and then continue on. So that's kind of what they're looking to do here. So kind of two good things that would come out of this. And it's all, I think Andy did a great job of summarizing the project. It's all internal to kind of their complex, if you will. And that's pretty much it. I'm just here to, if you have any questions on anything specific.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Very good. Andy, will you take us through this site plan?
So, just for yours and everyone's edification, I did get it on the screen here behind you. So the area sort of highlighted there in yellow is where they're proposing to work. So as the applicant stated, they're basically, so this is kind of a weird project, right? So they're simply just building a canopy, which isn't ordinarily something that we would have a lot to say about, honestly, because this is all interior to what they're doing. What makes a difference is that we have King Milling owns property, all the stuff to the south, so all these circles are the silos, right? So we have the bins and all that. So this is Broadway here. Then we have a property line right here that is all King Milling to the south, and then this parcel up here to the north is also King Milling, but where they're actually building most of this canopy is on the Mid-Michigan Railroad Inc.'s property, so it's not on King Milling's property. Initially, the thought was from the applicant that, well, we're going to need a lot of variances to make this work because we're building this on different property, which I certainly understand, that I was tempted to go that route. I had a couple of conversations with the city attorney about this, and we both agreed that If we could get something in writing from the railroad company that said, yes, we're good with this, we support this, we consent to this kind of project, that we didn't think that all of these variances would be necessary because it's not something that we're expanding something out like towards the right of way or towards some public, street or a side yard that really affects somebody else, right? If there was a different property owner to the north, maybe I'd have a different opinion. If instead of a railroad, this was a street, obviously that would be a different opinion. But we have something that basically is, you're not gonna really notice this very much on a day-to-day kind of basis. They're doing this as an internal improvement to cumulative operations, as they said, to keep the grain dry, to help relieve potential congestion issues on Hudson Street, because they don't have to back up and forward and do all that kind of thing. So what we decided is that if they could produce a letter from the railroad company that says, yes, we're fine with all of this, we would proceed through it with your blessing as the planning commission through site plan review, but we weren't going to require all of these variances from the city council because it's not really the type of thing that, in our view, was necessary. And with the blessing of the railroad company, we could basically treat this entire thing, these three things, as one big parcel for zoning purposes. And so that's how we decided to approach it. We did receive that letter. I'm not sure if it was included in the packets. I think it was. We did get a letter from the railroad company that said, yep, we're fine with this. They supported it. One question that we did have is it looked like there was a discrepancy between the name on the site plan versus the name that was on the letter. So I don't know if one of you can kind of address that, just so we're all on the same page here.
They're the same company, one is a subsidiary of the other. Yeah, so the two names, it's the same company, one is the subsidiary of the other. So the Mid-Michigan technically owns it, and then the G&W would be the subsidiary that services the line.
Okay. That was really the only, thing that we wanted to see in this. The other things that we normally look for with these types of projects or with any kind of site plan review don't really apply here. So landscaping, parking, site lighting, access, vehicular, pedestrian, like all of that stuff really does not apply here because they're simply building a structure. They're not building additional employee capacity. They're not building additional, processing capacity. Really, they're not doing any other site work that would require landscaping or parking or any of that stuff. So all of that we normally would walk through all of these things and say, okay, you got to have this many trees and you got to have this many parking spaces and so on and so forth. None of that really applies here. So that's why this is a little bit different from the type of review that we would ordinarily do for a project like this. Just to kind of briefly walk through the site plan review standards like we do for all of these are things that the Planning Commission must consider in its review of any site plan. The first one talks about whether or not the uses proposed would adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare. The structures shall be located on the site, the plan to take into account topography, size of the property, so on and so forth. And it shall not impede the normal and orderly development of the surrounding property. None of those really are a concern here. Again, this is all internal, basically no effect on outside property in our opinion. If anything, the lack of, or the potential improvements that we would see just from fewer crossings with Hudson Street and things like that are going to likely serve the city better than the alternative at this point. Item B talks about well-defined and vehicular pedestrian patterns, which is generally not applicable here. Item C talks about the arrangement of public or private vehicular and pedestrian connections to existing or planned streets in the area, which is also not really applicable here. Item D talks about the removal or alteration of significant natural features, which also does not apply here. There are no natural features because, again, this is simply canopy over the existing railroad tracks. E is satisfactory assurance shall be provided in requirements and all other applicable ordinances, codes, and requirements shall be met. That is attached as a condition of approval if you're inclined to approve it. You know, here, I mean, they're still gonna have to get building permits. We have the letter from the railroad company that, you know, allows us to kind of proceed and consider this a compliant project. And then the last item, F, is that the purposes and spirit of both the zoning ordinance and the master plan shall be maintained. And so this is kind of interesting that we're in this process of writing a new plan. We have a draft future land use map. In the draft future land use map, this is in the industrial designation, so the plan contemplates King Milling staying in its current location and encouraging that, quite frankly. And the existing plan, which is the one that's technically in effect right now, is sort of split between this downtown edge and industrial future land use category. Whenever we see kind of a split like that on a master plan, I think either category on a land use map could be considered compatible. So because this is in part in the existing plan, part of this property is planned for industrial uses. King Milling owns the whole thing, and because in the proposed plan we're likely to keep this in the industrial category, we think they would be considered complying with current plan and the draft plan and the zoning ordinance. So we did recommend approval of the site plan. We did add just a handful of conditions of approval. They're all pretty straightforward. I mean, the only question I guess we had was going to be about outdoor lighting. Are there going to be any sort of lights or anything under the canopy area that would possibly affect anything that we need to consider?
There will be lights under the canopy, but they shouldn't affect anything. It'll be all directly
Okay.
inside.
So that would really be the only potential item if they're inside the canopy. They're downward casting fixtures, which we can look at. I wouldn't have any other concerns about the projects from my perspective. So with that, I think obviously we can open the floor up to planning commissioner questions and comments and deliberation and go from there.
I think it's first of all, thank you for eliminating that train crossing, use. Several times I'm like, what? So thank you for thinking of the city. Commissioners, any discussion, any ideas that you see that are popping out that we should address?
I guess what if properties are sold or change hands? Like how, like, I know we're talking about King Milling staying here, but things, I don't know, things could happen. Like, I don't see it being a major issue, but.
Yeah, so I mean, if in the future, I mean, there was a significant enough change here, so we could ask for something that's more formalized of an agreement between the city. So we had this letter. If you wanted a more formalized agreement to sort of maintain that structure, that's fine. If it changes hands, it would be permitted to sort of continue as it currently did. So if King Milling sold to
They're gonna get what they get.
I understand.
some other milling company, I don't know what
Yeah.
it would be, or hopefully it would never happen, but hypothetically, if it did, this would all be allowed to sort of continue as it's currently been permitted with a new owner. And all of the terms and conditions would maintain the same over time.
Any other questions? Discussions? Okay. I see we have 5 requirements approved, suggestions. No demolition or earthwork. Do we need to review those?
Yeah, we can real quick. So these are the 5 conditions of approval that are proposed here. The first 3, I mean really the first 4, if there are any missing items, we are. So the first 3 are conditions that go on every single site plan approval that you guys take a look at and have been for a while. The last 2, so there were a couple of minor details that were on the site plan. They were not things that we were worried about, and we think that you can probably waive the submittal of those items. Number 5 was the lighting question that I had that Mr. Cole said that it would be, basically these would be under canopy lights. The only real other relating requirements here that we need to be careful of is to make sure that they're downward casting fixtures. They're not going to be shining, I don't know why they would, but they're not going to be like shining sideways out into the street or something like that. if they're all going to be inside the canopy, we would have no concerns about number 5. I think that would be satisfied anyways, so it's not something that I have to be concerned about. So those are the 5 conditions. We don't have anything further to add at this point.
Good. So I would entertain a motion to say this is a good deal with these 5 requirements, if they follow these.
I'll make a motion for that one.
Okay. Do I have support?
Support.
Any more discussion? Okay, Sue, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cadwalder,
Yes.
Commissioner Holst,
Yes.
Commissioner Padula,
Yes.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnett,
Yes.
and Chair Ellis.
Yes. Okay. Congratulations. On to staff report.
I have nothing further.
You have nothing for us? How are you doing? Good.
We're doing good.
Suit time.
Okay, commissioners, any remarks? Mike, thanks again for covering last month.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good.
I'm good.
David, Colin,
Good.
Nicole.
Please call me Nikki, those are my trouble. I did actually, to Colin's point earlier, when we're talking about some further like planning, education, how do we go about doing that? Is that something?
So I think a couple things, we can, Mike, city manager, Mike has asked me about that, so we can run through some training with you. In addition to that, there are a lot of opportunities online for training through the Michigan Association of Planning, for example, is a great resource. And that comment earlier also was a good time to remind you that at the end of September, the Michigan Association of Planning annual conference is going to be in Grand Rapids. We'll be there, and there will be pretty good attendance, and it's 3 days of different types of educational sessions. So you could look into registering for that as well. In addition, we can also put together some training materials for you and kind of walk through some of the planning commissioner training items. The Michigan Association of Planning also can put together, longer, training sessions as well. I mean, I've done some for them that are, fairly lengthy, but fairly detailed and fairly in-depth. Any way that you want to do this is fine with us. We're happy to help and provide all the training that you want, and there's a lot of online resources that you can tap into as well. Michigan Association of Planning also provides different classes and seminars aside from the annual conference, so there are opportunities kind of that pop up throughout the year for either virtual or in-person opportunities to take some classes regionally that I think would also be helpful.
So obviously the easiest, quickest thing are the online options. And are those paid, are those modules that you have to pay for? And is that like, I haven't looked into them yet, but, and if so, what's the process with the city? I think Mike had talked about that there's funding available to.
Yep, so most of the MEP stuff, there's a cost to it. They can either, so if you want to do like the entire planning commission training through them, they can work on a price with the city and kind of figure out what you guys are looking for specifically. That might be, if you want to do it as a group, that might be something that's helpful, so you're all kind of learning the same thing and asking the same questions.
There's a lot of free runs, so I did one last month with them. That was just an online seminar for an hour and a half. And you can either do it live or you can watch it later, even if, in the evening, you don't have to sit down and live. But I didn't pay anything for it.
Okay.
So I should read those emails they send me?
Yeah, that's how I got it. I got one of their emails and looked at it. So.
Yeah.
But if we do
Something
have
I really
questions
have to-
about, like, I'd like to do this better, looks like there's a fee, we address.
You can reach out to me.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I can get you signed up.
All right.
Okay. Awesome, thank you.
I get stuff in the mail as well. Do you get stuff in the mail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I noticed the conference and I was like, oh, that looks cool. And then I had the conflict that weekend, so
Yep.
But yeah, it looked like it had a lot of interesting stuff, so
Yeah.
that's what made me think to even bring it up today
Yeah,
before
absolutely.
Colin mentioned it. So.
Yep, and they have conferences throughout the year. They've got stuff in the winter, they've got a couple of spring conferences. The big one is the one in the fall, this annual conference that we all go to. But yeah, and any of them are great, and they have a good network of staff and consultants that'll help put materials together for you. And frankly, I mean, if you have questions that are maybe specific or something you want to know, just call me. I'm also available, or email me. I can also assist as much as you want.
Very good. John? Anything?
Nothing there.
How was the hour and a half?
It was good. It was on fair housing and roles for planners, so it was an interesting discussion. They had some people from outside of Michigan that came in, talk about how they did business in their cities.
Very good. I have nothing further, and I would entertain a motion to call this meeting to a close.
I'll motion.
Any second?
Second?
And support? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. This meeting is closed. Thank you.